good afternoon, good evening. My name is Dr. Emma Carmody. I'm coming to you from Sydney, Australia. I am a co-founder and the Director of Legal and Partnerships of Restore Blue, which is a company we founded in early 2022. I haven't always worked in business. In fact, I've spent most of my career working as an environmental lawyer. Here in Australia, I've worked at a very grassroots level with communities, conservation groups, Indigenous peoples and farmers, and I've used the law, often quite successfully, to protect our beautiful rivers, wetlands and floodplains. Internationally, at the other end of the governance spectrum, I spent over 5 years working as the sole legal advisor to the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands in Switzerland. I decided to become an environmental lawyer when I was at university, and I'd say it wasn't just a job, it's never just been a job, it's a vocation, it's really in my bones, which is why people were very shocked when I announced earlier this year that I was quitting and starting a business. So that begs the question, if I was so passionate about my career as a public interest environmental lawyer and I was successful, why did I change? Well, I stopped one day and I had a very honest internal dialogue with myself, which basically went something like this. We've lost 80% of the world's wetlands since industrialisation. And in my working lifetime alone, the last 20 years, we've lost 35% of the world's mangroves. So that's my working lifetime. So clearly, whatever I'm doing is only anecdotal. It's not really having an impact at scale. In fact, nothing we're doing collectively is having an impact at scale. And so I challenged myself to think about the problem from a different perspective. And I use the word challenge advisedly because what I came up with was this idea that we needed to try and turn wetlands into an investment opportunity. We needed to shift capital and use that money to restore and protect them. The reason I was challenged is because I've always been quite skeptical about the role of markets in environmental protection. And in fact, I'd seen the worst of capitalism and the damage it does to the environment. That was my job, to stop development from destroying wetlands. And so here I was looking at it from the other side of the looking glass and considering whether or not we could use money in the right way to try and protect and restore at scale. One day I went out to visit a really good friend of mine who I met at a leadership course, an environmental leadership course about 10 years ago, Professor Will Gilmore, and that's him there in the hat and the sunglasses out in front of a wetland that he actually restored. Will is one of Australia's, in fact, probably the world's leading experts in coastal or blue carbon wetland conservation. And he said, "So Emma, how's work going?" I said, "Well, work's great. I love work, doing really well, but we've got a bit of a problem with wetlands, we're losing them en masse and nothing we're doing is actually reversing that trend." And I told him what I was thinking, that we needed to create an investment opportunity because money speaks. And he said, "Well, that's really interesting because I'm thinking of doing something similar, but in relation to blue carbon or coastal wetlands, which is his specific area of expertise." He's a coastal engineer. And he said, "I've been talking to some of my colleagues, my team with whom I restore wetlands, and we agree that maybe we need to start a business and this is how we're going to scale restoration." So fast forward a number of meetings and conversations, and we all realised it made a lot more sense to join forces and combine their expertise as scientists and engineers restoring sites, because they've already restored 6 coastal wetlands, large coastal wetlands in Australia on a non-commercial basis. And my expertise as a lawyer, because of course the legal frameworks surrounding this in Australia and internationally are very complex. And so that's how Restore Blue was born. It was a process of a great deal of reflection and a decision for us to bring our skills together to try and scale wetland restoration. So how are we going? We've only founded the company this year. Well, we've assembled some of the world's leading experts in blue carbon coastal restoration, some of the only people in the world who actually have a track record in restoring these sites, and I have the legal expertise to complement that. And we've been working really hard to develop key relationships with individuals and organisations across the country, people with whom we need to collaborate if we're actually going to realise our goal to restore coastal wetlands at scale. And as a consequence, some of those relationship building pieces have come to fruition, and we've just signed an MOU with an international NGO with whom we're going to collaborate on restoration, at least one restoration project. We've almost finalised the contract for a financial licence, which is really crucial because in Australia, to deal or trade in carbon credits, you need what's called an Australian Financial Services Licence. Why do we want this? Why don't we want to just hand them over to a broker? Because we want to be in control. We've made a pledge to never trade or do any business with fossil fuel companies, which means we need to manage those premium blue carbon credits and decide to whom we want to sell them. And we only want to sell them consistently with our ethics and values as a for-purpose business. We've used our scientific expertise and we've mapped tens of thousands of hectares up and down the east coast of Australia. We know where the opportunities are, and we're beginning to do that around the world in some other key locations. And we're progressing 2 initial sites, which is quite exciting. What are the challenges? Well, I've already alluded to the fact that the legal frameworks surrounding coastal restoration work are quite complex. So that's definitely a challenge, but one that I feel that I understand with my expertise. Perhaps the bigger challenge is the fact that there is really a fundamental mismatch between the way funds are structured and the reality and timelines associated with ecosystem restoration. You can't necessarily deploy all funds and then close the fund within 10 to 15 years. The timelines associated with that restoration piece are longer. And so we got a long way through a due diligence process with a major institutional investor. They were very impressed with our financial modelling, which was and is robust, impressed with our expertise, but when they realised that the timelines associated with restoration didn't really line up with the fund structure, they couldn't progress it. In any case, what's our goal? It's to restore at least 10,000 hectares of lost blue carbon wetlands in Australia and internationally by 2030, and hopefully to exceed that target. And in so doing, to recreate all of the co-benefits that go with healthy ecosystems, coastal ecosystems. So obviously sequestering large amounts of carbon. They store up to 10 times more carbon than tropical rainforests, but we're recreating ecosystems, habitat, fisheries, we're removing nutrients from water, and we're recreating places that are of great significance to Indigenous peoples. We've got a growth strategy. When we have seed capital, we'll be able to engage staff initially across Australia to help build the property pipeline out, but we eventually want to be recruiting staff internationally to help with international project origination, and we're hoping that we'll have our first offsets to market by mid-2024, 2025. We need around US $2.5 million for the first 3 years of operations, so that covers internal costs as well as infrastructure work for those actual restoration projects. And in return, we hope to generate a minimum of 3.5 million blue carbon credits and all of the co-benefits that go with genuine ecosystem restoration. As you can imagine, monitoring and evaluation for an environmental lawyer and a group of scientists is high on the agenda. So we will be tracking vegetation changes in near real time using remote sensing. We'll use best practice scientific methods to transparently quantify the less readily observable ecosystem services and co-benefits such as fisheries productivity and nutrient removal and cultural values. And we'll use all of this data that we've collected through remote sensing and through the other best practice scientific methods to develop, maintain and update robust environmental accounts, which we can share with our partners and customers. Just quickly, why Restore Blue? Well, I think it's pretty clear we go well beyond carbon offsetting. We're about recreating some of the world's most important and fragile ecosystems. We believe in genuine climate action, and as I've already mentioned, we've pledged to not do business with fossil fuel companies, and we're structuring the company and acquiring the licenses we need to maintain that control so we can act in a manner that's consistent with our values. We're backed by science, and we really believe in the importance of taking time to build key relationships of trust with all of our prospective partners. So thank you very much for your time, and you can visit us at our website.